Well, welcome into another edition of Silver Lining Podcast. I'm Adam. Across from me is Rex, and we do have a guest today that we promised you that we would have. So we'll talk to Ben and introduce him here in a second. I do want to give a big shout out to Cammie, one of our optimists. And Rex and I love all of our optimists. Everybody's been really kind and great to us. And I got something in the mail today, Rex, and Cammie makes these little figures. I don't know if you can see them or not, but she was asking what color my eyes were for a reason. She actually, and I said hazel, and she goes, well, what color are Rex's eyes? And obviously she knew they were blue, but she go, are they that blue? And I was like, yes, they're that blue. So she made me my own personal guy of these little guys, and then she got me a pickleball obsessed thing. And then, Rex, she sent you a letter, and then I'm going to open it for you, even though it's addressed to you. It's the same little
What happened to privacy?
No privacy with you. Here you are with your little bald head, and then here is Lisa. So here we go. And you guys can kiss. All right, good.
Yeah.
So you got it. You have a present. We want to thank Cammie for sending those and making those. We just appreciate anything that people do. We don't ask for anything. Obviously, Rex and I don't want to have people buy us or send us presents. But if you feel like you want to do something like that, we're definitely going to appreciate it. And I'm going to put mine. I know exactly where I'm going to put mine because it's me. So I'm going to hang it from my mirror on my car, on my truck, so I can see it swing back and forth as I drive.
Sweet. Adam, I didn't tell you this. I got an Amazon package in the mail. There are 5 cans of gourmet cat food in it. No explanation. I have no idea who sent it or why.
Well, I do see on our Facebook group, a lot of people love their cats. So we have a lot of people who are into cats. So maybe try it, Rex. Just take a bite and see what you think.
Well, maybe someone's got to come visit us and bring their cats with them, and they want to have the right food here. I just don't know yet.
Surprise, surprise, surprise.
Well, I'll get more information on that.
All right, let's get to our guest, Ben. So Ben is my cousin. He's Rex's nephew. And Rex had mentioned that he talked to Ben not too long ago. And Ben really impressed what he said to Rex about trauma and healing and counseling and all these things that Rex came back and said, I really think that Ben would be a great guest and help some of our optimists as well as us all learning. And I'm all about learning. So, Ben, it's been a minute since we've seen you. How are you?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I'm doing pretty well. I'm having a good time out here in South Texas. It's getting warm, but it's the good temperature right now. My boys and I and family are playing a little bit of lacrosse and just doing the counseling thing that I do.
Love it. A little bit of lacrosse. How much are you and the boys into it, Ben?
It's all consuming, to be fair. We watch all the college lacrosse, all the pro lacrosse. We're watching scout film on other teams. We talk about it on the ride home and the ride there, and it's a full family deal. Alice is probably the best lacrosse analyst that's never played the game on the planet.
You're grateful to have her tell you what you guys are doing right and what you're doing wrong.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Great feedback after the games and for the boys and everything. We value it.
So, and by the way, I love the beard. I love it. It's amazing. How long have you had it, and how long are you wearing it for?
This is probably the most contractor beard style that I've had since I was deployed. So I finished going overseas to Afghanistan in 2018, and I shaved it and said I'm not going to wear a beard. And when I was coaching lacrosse, it was a good thing for the boys. They like the combat stories. So I grow a beard every year for lacrosse. So this came on about 4 or 5 months ago, and I always tell them they can shave it if we win state. So it's like this little game that we play, and it just keeps growing all spring till May.
I love it. Let it go. We're going to get you a t-shirt that says, let it go. We want to see how long that thing can go. So when Ben was younger, I called him Benny Fufu. He was my little cousin. We had a great relationship. Years go by in life, and everybody knows, you get married, you have kids, life goes on, and you don't keep in contact as much. So it's great to have you on and be able to talk to you. I know that you had a military career. I know that you've seen a lot of things. What are you willing to share with people before we get to the trauma and the healing? What kind of things in the military did you learn, did you see, or anything like that? Give us any kind of background, because I know people are obsessed with Rex in the Air Force too.
And I'm an Air Force guy, former Air Force guy as well. So probably I'll just start with the trauma, because the most traumatic thing is actually that song that you guys used to sing that goes along with that name, Benny Foo Foo. All that.
That started your trauma.
Yeah, it just keeps going through my head now.
And here I was thinking you loved that, and next thing you know, you're like, this was very traumatic for me as a child.
Yeah, I can still hear that song now. So thanks for that.
Yes.
No, it has been a while. I did, right after high school, go on a mission to Brazil, came home, tried the college thing, got married. I was doing all the things I was supposed to be doing, and I had a 9 to 5 in a cubicle that I just couldn't stand. And I knew that there was something else that I needed to be doing. It was my older brother, actually, who introduced me to the pararescue idea in the beginning. Read all about it, did a bunch of research. My wife and I dug into it, and we both decided that that's what we were going to do. Daniel was a newborn. He wasn't quite 1 yet when we enlisted, and I went through the selection course for pararescue for special operations in the Air Force. I did 6 years of that active duty, got out, was a paramedic and an instructor for a little while at an Army Combat Medic School, and then went right back to contracting. So then I was in Iraq and Afghanistan for the next 11 years on a 90-30 rotation. So 90 days gone, 30 days at home. And we traveled through that all the way until Daniel was 18. Wow. And I came home and coached his senior year of lacrosse. Was our first year really together for a full year in his entire life. And I did special operations attached to SEAL teams, Green Beret teams, unilateral Air Force teams for search and rescue, downrange. I did some weird stuff that PJs aren't supposed to.
Weird stuff in the military. What is that?
Yeah, I learned how to fly UAVs, and that was odd. I wasn't supposed to do that. Then I attached to a special forces team that was collecting intelligence. I wasn't supposed to be doing human intel or flying UAVs in the Philippines, but I did. Wow. And just had some really random experiences that culminated in me working in Kabul, doing, air wing for the embassy, counter narcotics and transporting embassy personnel and things like that. And that, again, was kind of a weird conglomeration of a bunch of guys who had been active duty in different roles and then came together to be on a team for the Department of State and the DEA and stuff like that. It was pretty crazy, pretty wild thing.
Ben, for those of us who have never been to the Middle East or Afghanistan or Iraq or anything like that, people claim that in being in Arizona, it gets hot. But is it hotter than it is in Arizona summer there? I couldn't imagine that it's hotter, or is it comparable?
It's definitely hotter. It's definitely hotter. I'm in San Antonio a lot, and this is where we live now. And in the summertime, the heat index will be 115 with, all this humidity, and the temperature will be 105 or 110 in August. And it is hotter than that for me in Iraq and Afghanistan in the summertime. It's brutal. It's why everybody over there is so angry. It just doesn't let up. It's extremely
that causes the anger is the heat. It's so funny that people do in Arizona get mad in the summer, but they are happy as a lark. And like in the last 3 months, everybody's been super happy.
The heat is brutal there. And then, the winter, my beard freezes and, your spit freezes before it gets out of your mouth. So you get the extremes out there.
Cold. Wow. So with the things that you witnessed and the things that you've been through, when it comes to trauma, this is one of the main reasons we want to have you on is discuss trauma, is that you actually went through a lot of trauma watching the things that you've seen or going through the experiences you've seen.
Yeah, and one of the things that I run into a lot in my professional career now, being a therapist for the guys that are experiencing PTSD, substance use disorder, and all of those things, everyone assumes that it all comes from military service. And the reality is that 100% of the veterans that I've treated, that I've come across, and this is myself included, that there's trauma previous to military experience that's really the index of then the exacerbation of what they experience when they come home. And so the majority of these things that we're dealing with post-war are things that we probably should have dealt with before getting into the military, so that we could handle what was about to happen.
That's pretty deep though, because people sign up for the military, they're going in, everybody has how they grew up, and they're, some people had a really terrible childhood, and they have all these issues that they bring into the military, and then they get trauma. They're already traumatized, maybe never got treated, maybe never went to a therapist, maybe never got any of that out. And then they go and they experience Iraq and Afghanistan and think crazy things that you see and that they're asked to do, and then they do it. So you have trauma on trauma, and then when they're coming back, and then that's what you come across a lot. That it's not just what they've seen in Iraq and Afghanistan, but maybe before they left, the trauma that they've had in their childhood or being a teenager or something.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to me because when I was first diagnosed with PTSD and MDD, major depressive disorder, it was 2009, and I'd been struggling with some things for a long time before that. But at the time, the VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and their mental health services would not discuss anything outside of your military experience. So when I first went to get treated for trauma, they wouldn't talk about religion, they wouldn't talk about child abuse, none of that stuff unless it had directly correlated to the military service. They've since changed that, of course, but I think it was a huge gap in our healthcare for a long time because we were dealing with something that was an exacerbation of the trauma, but not the root of it. And you can work on that all you want, and you'll still have similar results to stimulus. You'll still have panic attacks or floods of emotion that you can't explain. Because these other things in the background are still there.
Wow. That's just fascinating. Ben, tell us a little bit about, you've mentioned you're doing counseling now. Tell us about your transition into counseling.
Sure. I was working on myself in order to fix what I had done to my family, almost irreparable damage, just over the years of all the things that we had been through together. Trying to work as a single mom for my wife with 3 boys, essentially, while I'm running around the world doing my job. Limited communication and things had strained our relationship, and the stress that we were both experiencing separately was never really grown through together because we didn't have time or space for it. We were both trying to handle the world as it was for us with our responsibilities. And so I was at home saying, I'm never going to deploy again. And I'm going to fix this, and we're going to be a connected family and have a good relationship, and I'm going to be a person that I want to be, as opposed to a person that's surviving and trying to make it every minute just to the next minute and not being present in anything else, because all my energy is going to fight the battle in my own head. And I'd seen too many guys protect the people around them by isolating themselves. With traumatic experience, if we're protectors, if we love the people around us and we experience something we can't understand, then we separate ourselves from them in order to protect them from what we don't know we're capable of. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to respond to this. This is hurting you, so I'm going to isolate myself. And we think it's helpful. When connection is actually the antidote to PTSD, we separate ourselves from that opportunity and it gets worse. And I didn't want to do that. I'd seen too many guys do that. We had a problem in my career field. We had a problem in special operations as a whole on all the services, and we hadn't figured it out. And I lost a good friend of mine who I deployed with. He took his own life, and he had a family that he loved and adored, and this was a great guy who I had good times with downrange, and we worked together several times. And then I lost another good friend of mine. I call these guys brothers. They're obviously my military brothers. To an act of war in Syria and a helicopter crash. The unfortunate thing about Billy, who we lost, is that when we came back and we were talking to people, friends and family, teammates, they said something that shocked me. And they said that it was a good thing that he died in combat because they're afraid he was going to come home and kill himself. And they're afraid for Billy for a long time. And I thought that is the wrong way for us to see each other. We shouldn't be rooting for that. We shouldn't be concerned about that in that way without having a solution. And so I was getting ready to go to PA school and do physical medicine. A lot of guys from my career field do that. And I said, no, I think that we have enough guys doing that. I need to go do the mental medicine part and see what's going on and find a solution to this. So I went to counseling school to solve my own problems and to help the guys that we were losing. So I did the Bruce Banner thing, is what I tell everybody. I was like experimenting on myself with the therapy techniques to try to find what works. You know, does this tool work? Does this help me? You know, can I create this pathway for somebody else to walk on to healing?
And would you say it's when it comes to time, because a lot of people talk about time helps people heal, but as I ponder that, you know, it's been like 4 years, you know, when all this stuff really hit me, this hard trauma of what I've been going through, that, you know, time is, I guess it's helping me get up and go to work and do the things that I'm trying to live normal, if that's considered healing. But every time my mind goes back to the times where, you know, I found out that Charles was killed and I was by myself because nobody in my family believed me that they were murdered and all that stuff. Like, and then I found out about the kids. So all these things, like when I think about it, they hurt just as bad. So I don't know if that, like, it's not like where anything is lifted. Like none of those things when I start thinking about it is lifted. But as time goes, apparently I'm constantly trying to live my life and try to do, you know, go to work and do all those things. And I told Rex this a long time ago. I was like, I used to be so easygoing and laugh at things. And I just in my mind, I felt like I had a great life. Everything was great. And now I just don't think I'm that same person. And so I wish I could go back to being that same person, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
Yeah, that's a great way to explain this. I don't agree with the idea that time heals all wounds. Time puts you further from the experience, but you can hit yourself in the hand with a hammer until you don't feel it anymore. Your hand's still broken, right? And you still can't grab something. You're still going to feel pain when you reach out for it and all those kinds of things. The reality is that processing that information is what heals you. The time allows you to feel like you're further from it, but the brain is such a powerful tool. The brain is an amazing, amazing thing. It can take you right back to a place that you haven't seen in decades, and you can smell the smells, and you can hear the sounds, and you can feel the feelings that are there. And unless you've processed that information in a healthy way, you're living it again. That's how powerful your mind is. And on the other side of that, it's powerful enough to heal you from that same experience that it's putting in front of you. So it's an incredible thing. But yeah, just spending more time away from that experience is not going to give you that part of you back that you feel like isn't natural anymore. So because you're consuming that energy with the fight.
So the healing part comes from processing, which I guess a therapist would have to help you process that. But then again, you have to trust whatever therapist you're going to in your brain. If you don't trust that this is going to work, you have negative things going in. You know, what's the mindset about trying to go to therapy or process, or can you process it by yourself, or do you need help?
Yeah, and those are all great questions. There's a lot in there. I'm a little bit of a rogue in the counseling industry. And the reason I say that is because there's a lot of emphasis as a therapist on your relationship relationship with your client. You're talking about trust, incredibly important. Because I'm a combat veteran, I can walk into a room and sit down with another combat veteran. We can start sharing stories and feelings that they may not be comfortable sharing with anyone else because they don't have to protect me. I've seen it. I've lived it. They understand it. In the same way that someone who's been addicted to certain things, they sit in a room with somebody who's trying to heal from that, and there's a trust there because they understand that they know how that person feels. And if both people understand that about one another, it's really easier to unload some of these things that we protect, that we hide, that we don't want to share with anyone because of embarrassment or other feelings that come up because they're powerful emotions that flood our bodies and we have responses to that we don't like. Those walls come down when you trust somebody. And so that's an important part of a therapeutic relationship. Where I differ from, I think, some of the industry is that I don't think that relationship needs to prolong. I don't want to develop this codependent experience with a client of mine where they feel like they need to come to me to talk. I look at it more like dental work. I'm going to fill the cavity because you can't do that yourself. I'm going to give you toothpaste, maybe a fancy toothbrush, teach you a technique to keep your teeth clean, and you're not going to come back to me to get me to brush your teeth every week for 10 years. You're going to go home and brush your own teeth. If you come across something you can't solve on your own, come talk to me. So I'm really in favor of building that trust for the work that we're going to do together. And then we're going to do this work and you're going to live your life and get that hour back a week to do what you want with it. When you're healing from these things.
Is the reason people don't want to, when they're doing the process and you give them the whatever it is that they should be doing every day or every week or whatever it is until they have to come back, is it that it's too painful for them to brush their own teeth, so to speak? So they want to keep coming to you for you to keep making it easier for them to do that? Or is the process of recovering from something like that's going through the trauma, is that just a painful thing to go through, but it's necessary?
Yeah, I think it's important for us to kind of define trauma a little bit before I can answer that question, because that's really important in the question that you're asking. So we talk about trauma a lot, and Hollywood puts trauma on, the shows that we stream and the movies that we watch, and it's all blood and guts, it's all war and that kind of thing. The reality of trauma for me is anything that your brain can't make sense of at the time. Now that can be anything, literally down to this kid called me fat in second grade, and I just didn't have the mental development and the understanding and the experience to say, well, that kid was just stupid, or he was angry, or he was being an idiot, or having his own problems. So I internalized that. My brain said, man, that hurts. There's something wrong with me. And it puts it in this category of I am not. And this is the big thing that I feel like exists in our battle for everyone on the planet. I am versus I am not. I am not's the big lie that gets put in there through your experience, through external factors, other people, things people say, caregivers that are supposed to support you that don't, abuse that we experience. There's something misunderstood about why that's happening to me. And when my brain can't make sense of it in a really intelligent way with analytics and all my experiences, knowledge and wisdom, it puts it in this protected space that says, that hurts. I don't want to touch that. It overwhelms me. I don't know what to do with it. So I'm going to keep it here in the limbic system where we re-experience things with our five senses. You were talking about earlier, you can smell it, right? There are things that you experience in the limbic system that you haven't processed that feel like they're happening to you because they involve all the five senses. Trauma is that reinforced over time with that I am not message that you couldn't make sense of, and then it gets triggered or tripped over because it's packed away and we're trying to avoid it. Our natural fight or flight response gets initiated whenever we trip over those things because our body and brain are working together to help us survive. They want to get us out of this problem. So in the same way that if a car was coming at me, I would dump all these hormones to be able to jump and run. That's what your brain's doing. It's saying this thing is going to hurt us. We need to escape or we need to fight it. And so I'm going to dump all these chemicals to spin your body up. I'm going to increase your heart rate, your blood pressure, your breath rate. I'm going to shut down your metabolism to divert all your resources to physical running or fighting. But this is an emotional threat. It's a memory. you can't use that tool to fight that battle. So you get spun up. Your body is flooded with all of these chemicals that are supposed to be there to help you survive something, and it's maladapted to a struggle that you're not going to win that way. So in the fact that trauma can be any of those things, moving through it is the only correction. It's not a one-for-one exchange. If you had trauma for 10 years, when I was a kid, I experienced a lot of abuse, physical, emotional, sexual abuse. I've survived all of those things over years of my life. But it doesn't take that same number of years to heal from the trauma, because now I do have all this knowledge, experience, and information in my brain that I can use to process this. It's a matter of allowing myself to do it. So when I'm with someone and talking to them and I develop that relationship of trust, I might be able to open that door that's been a protected space for me and let that information be used by my brain to make sense of it, put it in a category, let it become long-term memory. We pull that I am not into this place called adaptive information processing, and your brain takes that information and makes sense of it. Oh, it really has nothing to do with me. I am good enough. I do have value. It's not that I'm a terrible person. It's not that I'm broken. It's that something happened to me by someone else's choices that I couldn't understand. And I've been protecting myself from it all this time with my natural instinct because I was afraid it was going to overwhelm me.
You mentioned earlier too about one of your brothers in the military that came home and took his life, and unfortunately, we hear a lot of that happens. I don't know what the rate is, but I've
22 a day.
Is it 22 a day? Is that where Rex does his push-ups? I think. Yeah. So with that being said,
my t-shirt is
don't give in to.
I don't know if you guys can see this.
Yeah, that's awesome.
War Within. Let me read it, because some people aren't watching the video.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Don't give in to the war within in veteran suicide.
So with that being said, and it's heartbreaking knowing that we have people that go into the military, protect our country, do all the things that are necessary to keep our freedom and our safety, and then when they come back, they get into that mode of what they've been through and all this craziness that happens. And you said the brain is like one of those, your brain is just way more than what you even think it is. I think we use maybe 3% or 4% of our 100% capability of our brain. Somebody said something like that. We had an optimist that we interviewed not too long ago, and she talked about, she got to the end of the road and she was going to kill herself. And she mentioned that she was sitting there, contemplating on suicide and taking all these pills and ending it all. And then she said she just heard a voice in her head, telling her not to do it or whatever it is that happened at that moment. If somebody's watching and they're that deep depression, and everybody, at least people that I know of, have gone through at least some kind of depression. Some are way more extreme than others. But when somebody gets to that point, Ben, and they're on the verge of, look, I just don't want to live anymore, and they get to that where there's no more hope and all that stuff, what advice or what is something that maybe you could tell them if they ever get to that point that maybe help them not do it?
Yeah, that's a really heavy thing. And for me, it's a lot about fatigue. We get tired of fighting that internal struggle. It's exhausting. And we don't feel value in life because we can't enjoy the good moments. We're always going to have the different emotions that come in life and different challenges. But when you're constantly fighting to survive, we call that being in the red, and you're hyper aware and hyper vigilant. And if you're in the red all the time, it wears you out. So the majority of people in that state, in my mind, are exhausted. And with your last effort, I would say connect with somebody. So there's a great telephone number that they created, 988. So 911's for physical emergencies, right? If you dial 988, that's for mental emergencies. So you can dial that number. If you're a veteran, you can press 1 and you can get to veteran-centered care, and you can just blow off steam to somebody. Just communicate, connect with another human being. I've talked to some of the people who work there, and they love their jobs. They love to connect with people and chat with people. If you're exhausted and you just can't think of any way to escape that fatigue and that exhaustion, use your last ounce of effort and energy to connect with someone. If you can't get, your support network on the phone, that's the number to call. But reach out to somebody, every single person. And we have these sayings throughout our community and everything, like, I'd rather be there for your pain than be there for your funeral.
That's true.
So somebody's going to answer the phone. Somebody's going to pick up. Somebody's going to communicate with you and dissipate that energy and that fatigue.
So, Ben, everything you've been talking about really applies to all of us. But let's talk just for a second since we talked about veterans also and how enormous that challenge is, how many veterans have access to a counselor who is a veteran that has had PTSD like you?
I wish it were more. It's hard to answer that question. There are a lot of nonprofits that I call Veterans Helping Veterans, because our care, it can't keep up with the volume. It's overwhelmed by volume. A lot of the people who work in the Veterans Administration are veterans. Not all of them have seen combat, and not all of them are therapists, and so there's a handful, I would say, in comparison to the number of people who need it. And so there's just no way that the volume can be met. The supply and demand just doesn't work out. I did work at the VA for a while thinking, I'm going to solve this problem from the inside. I'll help as many veterans as I can. These guys and girls are going to come to me and it's going to be great. And it is great, except for the system is overwhelmed. And there's no way that I can see that being fixed to the point that it solves the problem that we're experiencing. So a lot of veterans like me are taking to creating their own system to help each other, because we realize that the system that's in place is inadequate. There's just not a lot of access in the way that we need it to be accessed. And so there are a lot of organizations, a lot of people out there that are trying to help meet that need. And that's really important and valuable. There's another problem with our community in that we just don't ask for help. We feel like we can solve any problem, we can fix anything. We've overcome so much, we've adapted to so much that we can just do it ourselves. And I think, we've got to humble ourselves at the point that it becomes too much and reach out for help. And so that's another issue that we have to figure out.
A lot of issues there. It's a whole ocean, isn't it? Problems, challenges.
It really is. And I think, people who are empowered in their passion make a difference. And I think that's what you guys are doing. And that's why I was so excited to come talk to you about it. Because when I talked to you, Rex, about the community that you guys have created, I was really impressed. And I know that's helping on such a larger scale than I can do. I'm seeing people an hour at a time. And you guys are able to help this larger community that's also has its ripple effect with others that they're reaching out to. And I think it's amazing. And so that's a great thing. And that is what has to continue in order for us to make these solutions work.
Well, I feel great about the community that organically is just started in. And, I think a lot of people felt like Rex and we were doing this, to get information from our, to write a book. And also Rex and both of us like to talk about things for us to heal, where a lot of other members of our family don't go that route or want to go that route. But as you know, but Rex and I feel like just from us talking and doing those 10 episodes that we promised that we were going to do, a lot of it was, okay, hey, there's people that, at least for me, a lot of people thought, well, Adam really hasn't talked to anybody in the media. He did that one 2020 special just because I was getting really bad text and emails and Facebooks from people that don't know me or know anything about it. They just know the story of my family. And those were really hard to take and swallow. But at the time, I was like, at some point, I have to, say, what happened to me, what I experienced. So, when that happened and Rex and I started doing this podcast, I didn't know what to expect. But as we did each episode, I felt myself getting a lot of stuff out. And also in writing the book, I got a lot of stuff out. When I wrote my first book, I went through some trauma in radio in Sacramento, which turned my life upside down. And I wrote a book about it. So I think for me, one of my healing things is writing or talking about it. Like you said, reach out to somebody but sometimes if you don't have anybody to reach out to or you don't feel comfortable talking to anybody, I think sometimes just writing things down that you're getting stuff, at least you're getting stuff out. I think that has really helped me. And then the community, you're talking about, and the people that listen to the podcast and even people that are on our Facebook group, a lot of them mention the same things. Like we talk about what kind of things can you do that will help you heal. And for me, a lot of it I talk about is, music. When you listen to like your favorite music, it does something different to your soul. You just feel different. Also, watching a movie that you attach to, like for some reason, I get emotional. There's certain movies that everybody gets emotional watching. Rex talks about, what is it, the Band of Brothers or which
Private Ryan?
Yeah, Saving Private Ryan. Every time he watches it, he bawls. And there's movies like me, like The Warrior or Cinderella Man, even Pursuit of Happiness. There's movies where there's an underdog and he goes through a lot of trauma and still ends up making things good or work or comes out with a happy ending. For some reason, those movies, I'm attached to all those. And I cry every time I watch them. I get the same exact emotions every time I watch them. So I'm not sure. I think that helps clean. I don't know what it does, but is there something with being a therapist, is there something to that?
Absolutely. You're laying it out pretty well. I want to make sure that I mention these couple of things because I want to touch on all of them. I want to talk about EMDR a little bit, bilateral stimulation and alexithymia. Those are the things that were going through my head when you were talking about this. You were essentially processing your feelings that you don't allow yourself to process at other times. When you're watching those movies, you're listening to that music, you're writing that down. At the same time, the act of writing is what we call bilateral stimulation. While you're following the words on the page that you're putting on the page and then rereading it, your eyes are moving back and forth and your arm is moving. And this is something that connects both the creative and the analytical side of our brains and helps us take that information into the adaptive information process. So you're actually doing what's naturally supposed to happen. The lady who came up with EMDR is called Francine Shapiro. And I'll probably butcher some of these things because this is just my own synopsis of it. So please take this with a grain of salt. Look it up online if you want the real information. But what I understand is that she was running in the foothills and had a lot to look at. And what I picture is like the Sandias in New Mexico. There's all these different things to look at. You're running in hills. There's sand and rocks and cactus and wildlife and all kinds of things. And her eyes were running back and forth all over the place while she was doing this run. And she was processing information. It was her time to clear her head, right? What we understand now is that bilateral stimulation helps our brain move information and take things and use all the knowledge and experience that we have to make sense of it. And she wrote a book called Getting Past Your Past, which is not the technical manual for EMDR, but it's more of a case study style review of it and what her clients went through, what she went through, and explaining it so that you could basically do it yourself. And you really can. There are clinicians that are trained in this. I specialize in it. I use it every day. This is what helped me on that pathway that I took when I said that I was trying everything on myself. There were a lot of things, coping skills and techniques that were helpful, but not solving the root cause. When I went through EMDR, it changed the way that my brain works. and I was able to have peace. I was able to have clarity of thought. I was able to get away from the battle that I'd been fighting long enough to make sense of it. And it was my own brain making sense to me instead of a counselor telling me what to think or telling me how to process the information. My brain was doing it, and it's incredibly valuable. So you're talking about writing. That is essentially 101 EMDR. You're doing bilateral stimulation. You're processing information that's in there that's protected, that you feel important. And it's the same thing you're doing while you're watching the movie. You're putting yourself in that position. You're experiencing those emotions that that person is experiencing, and you're processing that information. That's the thing that we don't do, because we think emotion, I mean, you guys can tell me, but I was brought up with, don't cry, don't be weak, move on. Just make it work. And the military facilitates that. And we push that, right? Operant conditioning. If you feel emotion on the battlefield, you're going to get someone killed. And that's great. It really does work downrange. You really do need to focus and drive through those things. When you come home, that doesn't serve you so well. People have a hard time connecting with you. Your spouse tells you you're a robot. Those kinds of things happen. And we become alexithymic. So alexithymia is the inability to define or experience emotion. I can't even explain it. There are hundreds of words to describe emotion in our language, and then even more in other languages that aren't exactly the same, and we'll use 3. And when we get to the point where we've taken ourselves away from feeling that emotion for so long, we actually lose the ability to express it and feel it. So when it comes in, we don't know what to do with it. We don't have a definition for that feeling, and so we don't have an understanding of how to travel through it. And because we spend all our time being tough or getting past those emotions or compartmentalizing it, whatever terminology you want to use, you've been training yourself to unlearn how to feel emotion. And it is the opposite of what you need in order to get through it.
That makes sense. That makes so much sense of what you just said. It's like now I understand a little bit better how to process what other people are talking about when they talk about stuff. So
can you just envision, Adam, lights going on all over Optimusville?
Oh yeah.
Everyone listening to this saying, "Oh, that's why." That just continues. Lights are on all over.
Yeah.
Then you have
my kind of advice on that is if you use 3 words to describe every emotion you feel, you need a feeling wheel. And it's a touchy-feely counselor therapist tool that's a bunch of feeling words that are color-coded that describe feelings. And they start in the middle with sad or angry, and they branch out into things like betrayal or injustice so that you can really define the emotion that's coming in. If you use frustrated for every emotion that you have that presents as anger or something you don't like, go get a feeling wheel and start training yourself how to define emotion so that you can understand what it is and let it be there and live through it.
I love it. Well, I've learned a ton today. It's a ton. It's a lot. And I'm going to have to process what I just heard.
Oh, yeah, there's going to be a lot of processing. Ben, I don't want to let you go until we hear something else. You're Lori's cousin. And you have some perspective on that. I'm fascinated with your therapist's background, how you explain the Lori and Chad dynamic and what happened. Would you mind sharing that here?
Yeah, sure. And I want to preface this by saying I don't know Chad at all. I never spoke to him ever. Never met him, never talked to him. I spent time with Lori and my cousins from time to time. I loved that house wherever it was. For me, mostly in San Antonio, and I felt love there. I loved going over there and just feeling accepted and loved every time I went. It was a different vibe, and I enjoyed it. And I don't know anybody who didn't feel that way when they were at your place, Adam, when we were younger. And even, growing into adulthood, and I would go and Lori would cut my hair, or I went to the computer school with Alex. We were going to be NT professionals back in the 90s when, we were going to make all this money.
Right.
I'm far from that now. But I experienced those guys in a different way. You know, when we were young, we were having fun, but there was also that element that I could see in them that was in me too, where there was this internal struggle going on, for sure. And the way that I understand or have explained to my own family the questions that they've asked about these things is that there's something really powerful about being able to counter that I am not that's in your head. And when you have that and you spend all your time in there fighting it, you do things like achievements in order to convince yourself that you're good enough or that you have value. You go get a certification, you go get a degree. For me, you go beat the special operations selection. You know, you prove to yourself by achievement that you have value, instead of that coming from an internal message or from a message from the people that you care about. And when you do that long enough and it doesn't stick, you'll reach for anything. And so in my mind, when I think about, you know, Lori's struggles and Alex's struggles just as people, I think about them having that battle. And I think about Chad presenting to them this opportunity to feel special, unique, important, valuable, something of worth, where all that other stuff can go away. You know, you're part of the 144,000. You're doing this special thing nobody else can do, that nobody else can understand. It's really easy for me to see them connect to that and say, this is important. This is what's going to relieve me from that internal struggle I've been fighting. I'll do anything. I'll run this course. I'll get into it. I'll try to do what I can to make this the thing that solves that problem. And I really feel like that's the battle that was going on. I don't know for sure, but that's what I connect with. That's how I make sense of it. And that's what feels right to me, that it was just, I'll do whatever I can to feel like I'm good enough.
That's exactly what I said. That was my feeling, my gut feeling. And I told Rex this right when all this was going down. I said, look, you know, Lori had all the things that happened to her. She married all different guys. She, you know, said Joe molested her kids and, you know, and all these things that may have happened to her, or that she had a lot of things that I feel like she wanted to do something with her life or be special. And Alex had all these things where, you know, he, you know, didn't have any success. And by the way, Alex could have been the most famous person in our family by, you know, being the best impressionist there ever was. He really had talent to do all these great things, and he didn't use that or focus himself into doing that. So he did a lot of things where he just took all these odd jobs, never, you know, got married for 6 weeks, but never was married or had kids and any of these things. And then he battled with the church thing about, you know, going to church or not going to church. And he wanted to have sex with a bunch of girls or whatever it was, that he got excommunicated from the church. He had a huge weight on him. So for Chad to tell him, look, come with us, you're forgiven because you are an angel that came down with Nephi. Like, he put all these things, you know, and gave them, like you just said, purpose. So then people are like, well, how could Lori and how could Alex be involved with killing kids? That's how. If they felt like this is coming from God and they thought Chad was from God, that came down, that he explained that to them, that they were all in on that. And that's and I know it's evil and it's all those things, but they're saying, how could they? And I'm saying, this is how they could. This is I think their mindset was focused on just that.
This isn't me, you know, justifying the action, but explaining how it could come about. If I can be absolved of all my sins and stop feeling like a piece of crap, you know, and start feeling like I have value after all the things I've been through, give me that. I'm going to go get that.
The easy way out.
If it's convincing, if it's convincing enough and I really can believe in it, if one or two things confirm this for me, or I get a good feeling in this place, I'm going to chase that because I've tried everything else, right? I mean, Alex, you're right. He's talented and intelligent. And when you can just go get a license in this and a certification in that and do this job and be good at that, you keep trying to do that and it's not working. It's not solving the problem. I'm jumping from thing to thing, from person to person to make me feel good about myself. Sex is a great escape from that idea that you're bad, and you start feeling pretty good about yourself. Look, this woman and I just felt pleasure. This feels pretty good. That can become an addictive process, just like alcohol or drugs can, to solve that problem, to make you feel like you have value or worth. And it's an escape.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being transparent and talking about, how you feel and what things that you've explained. And because a lot of it just is the same thing the way that I felt that things went by, like how could Lori and Alex do this? And that was in my mind, that was my explanation of how they could do it. Now I know they were evil by doing it. And they, in my mind, obviously, I think Satan had a lot to do with it and all those things. But, people ask, how could that happen? And just to explain that's how it could happen. And Rex brought up something that maybe one of his therapists had said, or not his therapist, one of his friends had said that, people say, oh, how could you do something like that? Because literally in your brain, you don't want to ever think that you could do something like that, but you could. That's the thing where people say, I would never do that. But
right.
What was it, Rex? Was it something like that? I know it's controversial, but was it something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. All of us want to know that we couldn't do what Lori did or what Alex did.
Right.
And they say, but you can.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I will kind of connect that for my community, hopefully. I can talk to a guy in Iraq who's a dad, and we can dehumanize people at war in order to do what we need to do. But at the end of the day, they're humans. We're fighting against other guys who are dads a lot of times. And if the tally or whoever comes up and says, look, we're going to come back here, and excuse me if this is like way too explicit, but this is the reality of things in that environment sometimes. We're going to come back here and we're going to rape your wife and your kids in front of you, and then we're going to kill them. Or you can take these guns and put them in your house, and anytime one of our guy comes by, you give him one. Or anytime you see the great white devil come by, you take a shot at him. Then we won't do that. And more than that, we'll even protect you. And what's his choice, right? We roll into town. Those guys are there all the time. They're living right next to them. They know what they're doing. They see them every day. They're walking the streets with these guys and living life. And so if I've got a choice to protect my family from horrible things, I might be capable of doing some of the things that I say I could never do. It's about survival. It's about protection. It's about, if you're starving, what lengths are you going to go to feed your family? If they're in trouble, what lengths are you going to go to protect your family? It's real.
Yeah.
And we are capable of these things. And sometimes it's about, maybe I haven't been in a position to have to survive. And so maybe I can't wrap my head around the choices they were making. But I really feel like that's where they were.
Yeah, me too.
Well, Ben, Adam and I and the whole community are going to be unpacking this for some time because you've given us a whole lot.
I'll watch this probably 10 times until I get notes out for sure.
No kidding.
Well, you guys hit me up and tell me, questions that people have and things that they want to know. I want to be as of much help as I can to anybody who's trying to unpack these things or figure these things out. I'm happy to answer questions and emails and texts and all that kind of stuff.
Love it.
Okay, we'll certainly do that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
You guys are doing great things. I love what you're doing. I love every minute of this. Maybe we'll talk sometime, like family does.
Yeah.
Like our family does. You meet other families.
No, other families. Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Soon.